Ahoy hoy! Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or time appropriate greeting, depending on when you're watching this video or where you are located, but thank you for joining me nonetheless. I am your host of this YouTube series, The Kevin Chandler, and you are watching The Stories Behind UFC 221, which is going down this Saturday, February 10th, in Perth, Australia, which is actually one of the interesting things about it because the UFC kind of set up these fights to be like Australia versus the world, which is really interesting. But before we get to that, we are going to start with the main event of the evening, Luke Rockhold versus Yoel Romero. To dive right into what makes this fight interesting, as always, styles make fights, and these two fighter styles are incredible. To start with Yoel Romero. Yoel Romero is a Cuban national Olympic wrestler who has spent his entire career grappling guys, taking them to the ground, dominating them, and holding them down there. So you would think if he transitioned into mixed martial arts, he would use his wrestling to take guys down, grapple them, dominate them, and prevent them from getting up. But he doesn't. I mean, he does use his wrestling and has incredible vicious ground and pound when he's down there. But instead, what he's kind of done is used his incredible athleticism and great fast twitch kind of fiber or muscles or whatever to create this style that he lulls guys into thinking the fight's going to be at this certain momentum and then just explodes in a flying knee from 6 feet away or a blast double across the cage and you don't know what happened. And it's almost like you can't prepare for it. And that's actually really interesting because we then bring up Luke Rockhold, and to say that Luke Rockhold is well-rounded is quite frankly not doing him enough justice. Luke Rockhold is so well-rounded that he has beat specialists in various skill sets. For example, he outstruck Costas Philippou on their feet and finished with a beautiful liver kick to the body. Chris Weidman is a black belt, if not brown belt, under John Danaher in New York City, and Luke Rockhold toyed with him on the ground. His mount looked effortless, and he's been grappling or doing wrestling with Cain Velasquez and Daniel Cormier his entire MMA career, so I think he's going to be okay there, which is to say he's basically as prepared as you can be, but like I just said, there's almost things you can't prepare for. What that's going to translate into is an entire fight of suspense. So this is scheduled for 5-minute rounds. If this fight ends up going to the 5th round or to a decision, you are going to be on the edge of your seat until the last second of the last minute of the last round, because this fight, don't get me wrong, Luke Rockhold could absolutely finish this fight at any point on their feet or on the ground. Yoel Romero has that ability to do something that you didn't even think was possible and show us thing that was just like, what? And so the entire fight's going to be like just excitement. It's going to be fantastic. Before that, we are going to have Mark Hunt versus Curtis Blades, and this is going to cap off Australia versus the world. And to cap it off, if you don't know who Mark Hunt is, I very strongly encourage you to check out some of his YouTube highlights or whatever, because the guy is amazing. Specifically, he has cultivated a large fan base because if there's two things that you would like give to a fighter that you can't necessarily train or really get better on, like EA create a fighter or whatever, is probably their chin, ability to take a punch, and their punching power, ability to knock somebody else out. Mark Hunt has both of those in spades. I mean, this guy took a flush head kick from Crow Cop and barely got sat down, and then contrarily walk-off KO'd Roy Nelson like it was nothing. In case you don't know what a walk-off KO is, it's one of Mark Hunt's specialties. A walk-off KO is when you knock somebody out. I've never done this, but it's when they knock somebody out so bad that they know they're knocked out, so they just turn around and walk away. It's called a walk-off KO because they just walk off from the guy's unconscious body, then the referee steps in to kind of halt the action. Mark Hunt has done this a number of times to guys that have been known for granite chins. So puts on incredibly exciting fights and sometimes takes one to give one with the granite chin. Curtis Blades, on the other hand, is basically the heavyweight prospect before Francis Ngannou. So he fought Francis Ngannou and in fact was the favorite going into that fight, ended up coming up short, but didn't get knocked out, took Ngannou to a decision and looked okay, but looked like he needed a few more fights to kind of get his legs under him. He's since had a few more fights and is now stepping up against Mark Hunt to kind of show us or try to show us that he's now in that upper echelon and wants to be there. So can Curtis Blades show us that he's in that upper echelon and is there now? Or can Mark Hunt give us another beautiful highlight reel knockout? We're going to find out. It's going to be exciting as hell. Before that, we get another Australia versus the world in Tai Tuivasa versus Cyril Asker. I believe he's French, so Asker. I don't know, whatever. So this one I feel like was kind of set up to be a little bit of a gimme fight for Tai Tuivasa. So Cyril has been in the UFC for a little bit, has looked okay, hasn't looked stunning, has a little bit of gray hair, is a little bit older, is thus the silverback kind of nickname. And so I feel like they're using this fight to show if Tai Tuivasa can really be the star they want him to be. You might notice there on the screen that he has 8 fights, no losses, and 100% of those have finished by KO. So every single fight that Tai Tuivasa has been in so far, he has knocked out the other guy, and it's been awesome to watch. We're hoping that then just continues. Cyril obviously hopes it doesn't and is going to do everything in his power to prevent it. Can he halt the hype train in Tai Tuivasa? We're going to find out on Saturday. Additionally, what we're going to find out is if China has a new star in Li Jianlang as he faces off against Jake Matthews, Australia versus China in this one. So Li Jianlang, one of the things that's interesting with him is not only is he from China, but he actually didn't come from the Ultimate Fighter reality show that they did to try to garner more UFC stars. He kind of came in more naturally and then just started fighting in the UFC and has looked good while he's been in here. So this one's an interesting because I think they're putting both prospects against each other, and it's not just to show the Australian dude and hopefully get a knockout. Li Jianlang, there's a good chance that he could pull off an upset here and look really good doing so. Either way, I think what we're looking at of this fight, though, is somebody to look really good. Jake Matthews has looked good and then has not looked great. Li Jianlang has looked good and then has not looked great. So I think what we're trying to see here is which of these guys can put a stamp on the other guy to rise to the top and show that he is that next level, wants to be ranked, wants to kind of keep fighting for those top fights. So that's what we're going to find out in that fight. And kicking us off to start the evening, we got Tyson Pedro versus Sapnap Safarov. Now, this fight, I kind of hate to say, I feel like is pretty much a gimme fight. They are kicking off Australia versus the world, Tyson Pedro versus Sapnap Safarov's Russian in this instance. And I mean, we don't really know much about Sapnap Safarov because he's only had one fight in the UFC and it was like 3 years ago. So he's a giant question mark, and he doesn't have a ton of experience, but has looked good in the experience he's had when he was fighting in Russia. So this one's definitely appears to be a kind of highlight for Tyson Pedro to give him this guy who hasn't had a lot of fights, maybe take him by surprise, show us that he's not kind of ready for the big lights or the big show, and really kind of put Tyson Pedro up on the pedestal. But as always, it's a fight. So Sapnap Safarov has skills. Whether or not he can put the stomp on the UFC's plans to kind of raise this, next Australian star to follow Mark Hunt, Tai Tuivasa, etc. Also, quick shout out. Tyson Pedro has some of the coolest tribal tattoos I've seen. Absolutely dig that shit. So those are the fights this Saturday. I will be watching. Will you be watching? Speaking of watching, as always, thank you for watching me right now. As always, I sincerely appreciate it, and I sincerely hope that you have a fantastic rest of your evening. Bye.